Welcome to India Inside, the GCC Advantage. We're brought to you by the CoreBridge GCC Desk. Our job is pretty simple. We help global companies and Indian leaders really cut through the noise. We want you to understand India's real potential as, the world's go-to hub for global capability centers. This isn't about just reading reports. It's about getting strategic insight for those big CXO level decisions. Today, we're in episode 10, Startups and GCCs, a Symbiotic Future. And what's so interesting is that we're seeing this powerful innovation partnership emerge between fast-moving startups and these huge established GCCs. But here's the twist. It isn't entirely organic. It's actually being well engineered. State governments are actively building and accelerating it, and that is reshaping global co-innovation. Before we jump in, just a quick ask from us. Please follow the show. It really helps us out. Okay, so let's get into this partnership. When you look at India's economic story right now, it feels like there are these two massive engines running at the same time. On one side, you have the startups. They're all about speed, risk-taking, experimentation.
Right, moving fast and breaking things, so to speak.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you have the global capability centers, the GCCs, and they are the complete opposite, really. They're these highly structured extensions of Fortune 1000 companies focused on scale, quality, and protecting IP.
And for years, what's so fascinating is that these two engines, they sort of operated in their own lanes, in isolation. But now they're coming together to form what is probably India's most powerful innovation partnership. The numbers on this are really quite telling. If you just look at the data, the startup ecosystem has pulled in an incredible $130 billion in funding since just 2014. That's a massive amount of fuel.
A huge amount of fuel for that experimentation engine.
Exactly. And at the same time, the GCC ecosystem is the engine for scale. It contributes more than $65 billion to India's GDP every single year. This isn't just theory. We're now seeing over 400 GCCs with formal structured collaborations with Indian startups. We're talking hackathons, pilot programs, even corporate venture arms.
And that intersection, that's where the real value is for global companies. So that shift from being isolated to being integrated, that's the real story here. I mean, historically, big companies saw startups as disruptors, right? A threat to be managed. Now they're seen as essential partners. So why? What's driving this complete reversal in strategy?
Well, from what we're seeing, it's really three big trends all converging at once that, any CXO needs to be watching. The first one is just the raw demand for speed to innovation.
Right. The old internal R&D cycle is just too slow for today's market.
It's way too slow. So startups give GCCs that immediate agility, while the GCC provides the structure to, actually commercialize it. So a prototype can become a global product in months, not years.
A huge difference.
A huge difference. The second piece is what I'd call talent crossover. You have to remember, a lot of these successful startup founders and their top engineers, they started their careers in GCCs.
Oh, interesting. So they already know the landscape.
They know the landscape. They get the enterprise challenges, the compliance, the data security, all of it. That shared background, it just cuts down on so much of the usual friction.
That makes a lot of sense.
And then the third, and maybe the most critical trend, is policy encouragement. This is the engineered part. State governments are now actively creating policies, financial incentives to push this collaboration forward.
I want to pause on that policy point because that's the real insight here. It's not just happening organically, it's government-enabled. So the question for you as a leader is this. What does that policy scaffolding mean for the actual speed of your company's transformation? It suggests the whole ecosystem is being wired for rapid scale. So let's talk about the value. For a Fortune 1000 company, what are the tangible benefits their GCC gets from working with these startups?
The biggest one is probably strategic de-risking. A GCC is, by its nature, pretty risk-averse. Partnering with a startup gives them this external pipeline for faster innovation. They can pilot really cutting-edge tech, generative AI, blockchain, you name it, but in a controlled, agile environment that's outside their main walls.
That's true. It means they don't have to chase every new shiny object internally. And that ties right into the second benefit, which is instant access to emerging technologies.
Exactly. If a GCC needs niche expertise, say in quantum computing, it's so much faster to partner with a startup that lives and breathes that stuff than to try and build it from scratch.
It bypasses years of R&D.
Absolutely. And with that comes a third benefit that's often overlooked: market intelligence and localization.
How so?
Well, startups are just closer to the ground. They have this real-time pulse on local user behavior, on regulatory changes, things a global HQ might miss. And that means the final product has a much better chance of actually succeeding in that market.
Okay, so that's the enterprise side. Speed, access, intelligence. But it has to be a two-way street. What's in it for the startups?
Oh, for them, the benefits are just immense. It can be game-changing. The number one hurdle for an early-stage startup is getting access to global customers.
The enterprise sales cycle is brutal.
It's brutal, but partnering with a GCC from a Fortune 1000 company, it's like a passport. It lets them bypass all those procurement hurdles and go straight to the global market.
An enterprise passport. I like that.
Exactly. And with that comes stable revenue and validation. A successful pilot with a big name gives them instant credibility. It makes them way more attractive to other clients, and it's often their first significant income stream.
And I imagine they get mentorship they couldn't afford otherwise.
Precisely. They get invaluable technical and regulatory guidance on all the hard stuff: data privacy, cybersecurity, global compliance, things that can derail a young company. And finally, a successful pilot is like a giant flashing sign for investors. It creates huge investor visibility and really accelerates their next funding round. It's a complete benefit loop.
That benefit loop is powerful. Let's go back to the policy side, because that's the scaffolding holding it all together. You mentioned we're seeing more formal structures, like centers of excellence.
We are. The COEs are where the policy really meets the technology. Over 70% of India's GCCs now either run or partner with a formal center of excellence.
Yeah.
These COEs are dedicated teams, or labs, focused on high-value areas like AI or fintech or cybersecurity. The policies aren't just encouraging partnership in general, they're pushing strategic co-creation in these critical fields.
Can you give an example of what that policy looks like?
Sure. Look at the state level. The Gujarat GCC policy for 2025 to 2030. It explicitly promotes these links through direct grants for incubation, partnerships for COEs, and this is key patent reimbursements.
So they're directly incentivizing the creation of new IP.
Directly. And you see a similar thing in the Madhya Pradesh GCC policy from 2024. It encourages COE creation, often in partnership with top academic institutions like the IITs or IIMs, and provides funding for pilot projects and patent filings. The strategy is obvious. They want GCCs to help build the local innovation ecosystem, not just to operate in a silo.
That state-level push is what turns a regional plan into a global outcome. Let's make this real. You have a case study from Gujarat's Gift City that shows how this works in practice.
Yes. We tracked a global financial services GCC there. They were struggling to automate the processing of complex, multi-language financial documents, contracts, compliance forms, that kind of thing.
A classic NLP challenge, natural language processing, teaching a computer to read and understand human text.
Exactly. The GCC needed human-level accuracy across 20 different markets, which is a huge ask. They partnered with a local Ahmedabad-based AI startup that specialized in exactly this kind of NLP model.
So a perfect symbiotic fit.
A textbook case. The GCC provided the structured data and the strict compliance rules, the scale and rigor. The startup delivered the super accurate AI model.
And this is where the policy kicks in.
This is where it kicks in. Because they were in Gujarat, they were able to leverage the state's policy for patent filing reimbursement and get grants for their COE partnership.
And the results for the business.
The results were pretty dramatic. They cut their document processing time by 60%. That AI model is now used in more than 20 of their global markets.
Wow. And what about the startup?
At the startup, shortly after the pilot, they successfully secured $5 million in Series A funding, almost entirely based on the validation from this partnership.
It's a perfect example. A state-enabled collaboration turns a relatively small regional partnership into a measurable global innovation win.
It does. But we have to be realistic and provide that CXO clarity. It's not always smooth sailing. There are real hurdles here. The most common one is just a cultural mismatch. Startups are all about speed. Ship it now, fix it later.
Well, the big enterprise wants 6 layers of sign-off before anything happens.
Exactly. That clash of pace is very real. And then there's the challenge of negotiating IP ownership. If you don't get that right from day one, it can stall everything.
And as we mentioned, the procurement process itself can be a major roadblock for these smaller ventures.
It can. But the good news is that the ecosystem is building enablers to solve these exact problems. You have state incentives, subsidies, and grants that can bypass standard procurement for R&D projects.
Okay.
You're also seeing more dedicated corporate innovation funds, where big companies set aside capital specifically to invest in and work with these startups. And the involvement of top academic incubators, like from the IITs, helps to bridge that gap and provides a neutral ground for testing.
So there's a real support structure forming around this model. Let's zoom out and look at some of the data from our own CoreBridge research. Our 2024 Innovation Ecosystem Map really validates this whole story. We've tracked over 60 startups in Tier 2 cities at places in Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh that have successfully partnered with GCCs in just the last 2 years. And the ROI for global headquarters is really compelling. First, collaborating GCCs are reporting a 25 to 30% faster time to market on their digital projects. And second, these co-innovation models deliver a 20 to 25% lower R&D costs compared to purely internal programs. This isn't just about innovation, it's about efficiency.
And looking ahead, say to 2030, we're expecting to see over 1,000 mature startup GCC partnerships heavily focused on deep tech like AI and fintech. This model is what's driving the rise of Tier 2 cities as real innovation hubs.
And I think the big strategic takeaway for every CXO listening is this. India is no longer just a talent play or a cost play. It's becoming a living laboratory where GCCs and startups are using policy and partnership to literally design the future of business and build a global competitive advantage.
I think that's the perfect summary. The story has fundamentally shifted. It's moved from offshoring labor to co-creating intellectual property. And that means global companies aren't just using Indian talent, they're actively co-developing global solutions here. For anyone who wants to dig deeper, we invite you to explore the CoreBridge resources and policy summaries that we've linked in the description for this show.
And the CoreBridge GCC Desk. Well, this is exactly what we do. We help facilitate these collaborations, we map the right partners, structure the agreements, and coordinate with state governments to fast-track everything. When startups and GCCs co-create, we make sure they can co-scale.
And as always, please follow this show. It really does help.
Join us next time. We'll be looking at the future of talent, specifically how GCCs are partnering with India's top universities to build the next generation of deep tech experts.
Thank you for joining us.
Disclaimer. This discussion is based on verified industry reports and state policy documents. All incentive details are subject to change, so please verify with official sources. Credits are in the description.